What happens when mercy meets shame? What happens when grace finds the one no one else would touch? Two people from two very different walks of life found themselves face to face with Jesus. One was a woman dragged into the temple, surrounded by angry accusers, her life hanging by a thread. The other was a wealthy tax collector, despised by his neighbors, hiding in a tree just to catch a glimpse of hope. Both were outcasts, both were broken, and both walked away changed forever. These are not just old stories, they are our stories. And if you listen closely, you may hear your own heart reflected in theirs. Stay with me until the very end, because the lessons we find in their journeys might just be the hope you have been waiting for. Hello, dear friend. I am so happy that you are here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you are comfortable. If you have a blanket, pull it close and let it wrap around you like a gentle embrace. If you have a warm drink, you may hold it softly in your hands. Before we begin, would you share where you are listening from tonight? I would love to know the place where your heart rests as these words reach you. Is it a quiet room in a busy city, a small home in the countryside, perhaps a soft chair beside a window where night is falling? Wherever you are, I want you to know that you are welcome here and that you are not alone. If these calm words bring peace to your heart, I would be so grateful if you could like this story, subscribe for more gentle readings, and share it with someone who longs for rest. And also, if you'd like to listen to more calming Bible stories like this one, I've created a special playlist just for you. You'll find it in the description below. It's perfect for peaceful nights, relaxation, or quiet time with God. You are part of something kind, something warm, something that cares for the soul. So take a deep breath now. Inhale slowly, hold it softly, and let it go like a sigh that carries away the weight of the day. Now let us turn our thoughts to a morning long ago. The air is clear and still. It is early, so early that the edges of night are only beginning to soften. The deep blue of the sky begins to pale. There is a faint glow behind the hills, a promise of light that will soon wash the stones of Jerusalem with gold. For now, the streets are hushed. There is a stillness before the stir of life begins. Doors remain closed. Shadows rest against the walls. A bird calls and then falls silent again. All is calm. Far beyond the city, there is a ridge of land covered with olive trees. The Mount of Olives. Quiet paths wind between the trunks, their roots gripping the earth like ancient hands. Leaves tremble gently in the cool breeze. This is where Jesus has spent the night. He has withdrawn from the noise and the arguments, the endless questions, and the hidden traps that the teachers of the law often set for him. He has found a place of prayer, a place where the Father's presence is near, and his heart is at peace. He rises now from that place, his robe brushing the ground as he walks. His steps are calm and unhurried. The day ahead will bring words of life and acts of mercy. For now, there is only the sound of his sandals on the path, the whisper of leaves, and the first faint hum of waking birds. The city gates are near. Soon he enters Jerusalem, where great walls rise pale against the brightening sky. The streets begin to stir. A woman sweeps dust from her doorstep. A man leads a donkey, its hooves striking the stones with a slow rhythm. A child runs with laughter in his voice. The smells of baking bread drift from an open courtyard. It is morning, and life is waking. Now we see the temple courts. They are wide and open, paved with heavy stones that have known the press of many feet. Pillars stand tall in long rows, casting quiet lines of shadow. The air is still cool here, though the first warmth of the sun is creeping in. This is a place where people come to pray, to listen, to learn. Today it will hold a scene that has been told for centuries, a story that still speaks even now. The Gospel tells us that at dawn Jesus appeared again in the temple courts. He steps onto the wide stones. A few people notice him and draw near. Then more come, and then still more. They gather because his words are unlike the words of any other teacher. They are not hard and sharp like the words of those who love to argue. They are not empty like the speeches of those who only wish to appear wise. His words are full of grace and truth. They are strong and gentle at once. So the people come, their sandals whispering against the stones, their eyes bright with hope or heavy with questions. Some carry children on their hips, some lean on sticks, some come out of longing, others come out of curiosity. A few come because they wish to find fault, to catch him in a word that can be used against him. But whatever the reason, they gather, and soon there is a circle of faces turned toward him. Jesus does not stand as he teaches. He sits down, as a rabbi would do, a sign that this will not be a hurried moment. This is a time for patience, for quiet thought, for listening with the heart as well as the ears. The people settle. The sound of movement fades. A stillness rests over the courts. Only the murmur of pigeons in the eaves, and the far cry of a vendor in the streets beyond reach the air. Then his voice begins, calm and clear. It is not loud. It does not need to be. The strength is not in volume but in truth. Each word carries like a ripple on still water. Each phrase seems to settle into the heart with ease. Imagine hearing him speak in this moment. His words lift burdens. They shine light on what is dark. They lead the lost to hope. Some who listen feel as if a door has opened inside them, a door they thought was locked forever. Others feel as if chains have fallen, though their wrists are bare. There is a warmth in his tone, a purity that draws the soul. The crowd is still, almost as if the whole world has paused to listen. For a little while this calm remains, but beyond the circle of listeners, another sound begins to rise. Footsteps, quick and firm, voices, sharp with purpose. They draw nearer. The peace of the morning is about to be broken. The Gospel says that the teachers of the law and the Pharisees come, bringing with them a woman who has been caught in adultery. They come not to learn, not to pray, but to accuse. They come with eyes that do not see mercy, and hearts that do not feel compassion. They come with the weight of stones already heavy in their hands, though their fingers may still be empty. They come with words ready to wound, words meant not only for the woman but for the teacher himself. They believe they hold a trap, a snare that will catch him no matter how he answers. They do not know that his wisdom is beyond their reach. The woman walks among them, or perhaps she is dragged, her steps faltering. Her hair is loose, her face pale with fear. Her garment clings awkwardly, perhaps torn, perhaps hastily wrapped after the cruel moment when she was seized. Shame burns her cheeks. Her eyes flicker like a bird that cannot find a place to land. Around her voices rise, harsh and eager. People turn to see. The crowd parts. All eyes are on her now, and on the men who surround her like a wall of accusation. They do not see her as a soul in need of grace. They see her as a tool, an object to be used in their plan against Jesus. Her sin is real, but their hearts are blind with pride. They march her forward until she stands in the center, before the teacher, before the crowd, before the eyes that pierce every secret place. And there, in the brightening morning, the question comes. It falls like a stone in the silence. They say, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" The words hang in the air like a heavy weight. The circle of men stands firm, their faces set, their eyes sharp. The crowd holds its breath. Some look at the woman with pity, others with curiosity, others with a hidden thrill at the spectacle. It is a harsh question they have asked. It is not only about the woman. It is meant to strike at the teacher himself. If he speaks one way, they will accuse him of rejecting the law of Moses. If he speaks another way, they will accuse him of cruelty and harshness before the people who have come to hear him speak of mercy. They believe they have trapped him in a net from which there is no escape. The woman trembles. Her head is low. Her hands clutch at the edge of her garment as if holding the last thread of dignity. The sun climbs higher now, and its light falls on the stones at her feet. She does not dare lift her eyes to meet his. Fear grips her like iron bands. Shame coils around her heart like a dark serpent. She knows her guilt. She knows the law. She knows the sentence that men like these are eager to carry out. Her breath comes quick and shallow. Her lips tremble with words she cannot speak. There is no plea that will soften their hearts. There is no escape in their eyes. The accusers speak again. Their tone is insistent, cold. They press him for an answer. They do not know that every word they speak draws them closer to a truth they have not imagined. The teacher does not rush. He does not meet their harshness with harshness. He does not lift his voice in anger. Instead, he moves with a calmness that unsettles their certainty. He stoops down, and with his finger, he begins to write on the ground. The movement is simple, yet it carries a weight beyond words. The eyes of the crowd follow him as he bends low. The dust of the temple floor is soft beneath his hand. His finger moves slowly, tracing lines that no one fully understands. The sound of voices fades into a hushed silence. Only the whisper of his hand on the earth remains. What does he write? The Gospel does not tell us. Some have wondered if he wrote words of judgment. Others think he traced the sins of those who stood there with stones in their hearts. But Scripture is silent on this. All we know is that he stoops and writes, and in that simple act, the storm of accusation seems to falter for a breath of time. The men press him still. Their voices rise again, sharp and demanding. They will not let the silence stand. They want an answer. They want to spring the trap. They want to see him falter. So he straightens, slowly, like the dawn lifting over the hills. His eyes meet theirs, calm and clear, and his voice carries the weight of heaven in words that are few and simple. Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. The sound falls gentle and strong. It is not shouted. It does not need to be. It enters the air like light entering a dark room, quiet yet impossible to resist. The meaning strikes deep, deeper than they expected, deeper than they can escape. The words turn the question back upon themselves. They came with stones hidden in their hands and in their hearts, but now their own hearts are laid bare. They came thinking of her guilt. Now they must face their own. The law they wield like a weapon now becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, they see themselves. There is no haste in him. After speaking, he stoops once more and writes on the ground. His finger moves in the dust as the silence grows heavy again. Only the sound of robes shifting and sandals scraping breaks it now, for the words he spoke cannot be ignored. One by one, the weight of them begins to press upon each man. They feel the sharp edge of conscience, the truth they have long avoided. Not one of them can claim the purity the words require. Not one of them is without sin. The oldest feels it first. Years have left their mark upon his face, but also upon his soul. He has seen much, done much, and though pride is strong, the truth is stronger now. His hand loosens on the stone he carried. It falls softly to the ground. He turns and walks away. Then another. Then another. The sound of stones dropping is like the soft patter of rain on dry earth. One by one, they leave, their footsteps fading into the distance. They do not speak. Their mouths are shut by a wisdom greater than their own. Soon the circle is broken, and the men who came eager to accuse have vanished like mist under the Sunday. Now the court is still once more. The crowd watches in wonder. Only the woman remains, standing there in the place where fear once gripped her. Her breath is uneven. Her heart beats like a bird's wings in flight. Slowly she lifts her eyes, and there he is, the teacher, the one who spoke words that turned the tide, the one who did not raise a hand against her, the one whose calm presence broke the storm. His eyes meet hers, and in them she does not see scorn. She does not see the cold judgment she feared. She sees something she has never known so deeply before. She sees mercy. She sees truth. She sees love that does not deny her sin, yet does not cast her away. He stands now, and his voice comes gentle, like water flowing over stones. Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? Her lips part. Her voice is a whisper, trembling, uncertain. No one, sir. And then he speaks words that will rest in her heart forever. Words that have echoed through centuries with the music of grace. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declares. Go now and leave your life of sin. The sound of those words is like the breaking of chains. It is like the lifting of a burden too heavy to bear. It is like light pouring into the darkest place of the soul. He does not excuse her sin, yet he does not crush her with it. He shows a way beyond it, a path where shame does not hold her captive. In that moment, the woman who stood trembling in fear stands in the presence of a love that sets her free. Pause with this scene in your heart. Let it rest there like a warm light. Let the gentleness of his voice move through you like a calm wind. He is the same today. The mercy that met her still flows like a river, deep and wide. No one who comes to him with an honest heart is cast away. His words are not for her alone. They are for all who have known the weight of guilt, all who have felt the sting of shame, all who have feared that their story could only end in stones. His words speak life. Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. The temple court is quiet. The sun is higher now, painting the stones with light. The people begin to move again, some whispering to one another, some walking in silence, their thoughts too deep for words. The woman lingers for a moment, then turns and walks away. Each step feels new, like the first steps of a child learning to walk. Behind her, the teacher remains, calm and steady, the shadow of grace stretching long in the morning Sunday. The court slowly empties, but the moment lingers in the air like a fragrance that will not fade. The woman walks away, her steps soft against the stones. Her heart beats with a strange mixture of relief and awe. Only moments ago, she stood on the edge of death. She felt the cold breath of condemnation on her skin. She heard the voices sharp with judgment. She saw eyes that burned with accusation. And then, in an instant that felt like the turning of the world, everything changed. The stones never flew. The sentence was never spoken. Instead, she heard words that opened a door she never imagined could exist. Words that did not deny her sin, yet did not destroy her. Words that spoke of a mercy strong enough to hold her shame and turn it into hope. Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. What must those words have sounded like? What tone carried them into her soul? Surely not the tone of anger or coldness. Surely not the tone of one who wishes to wound. No. These were words wrapped in compassion, words that held both truth and tenderness. They did not excuse what was wrong. They did not say the path she had walked was harmless. They did not hide the reality of her choice. But they opened a new path, a way beyond the ruin, a way into life. That is the heart of mercy, not to pretend that wrong is right, but to call the broken into healing, to call the sinner into grace, to call the lost into the arms of a shepherd who will never cast them away. As she walks, the air seems lighter than before. The morning sun warms her face, and the sound of her own breath feels like a quiet song. Perhaps tears fill her eyes, not the bitter tears of fear, but the gentle tears of release. She has been spared, yet more than spared, she has been seen, and she has been loved. And that love does something that fear never could. Fear can restrain for a moment, but love transforms for a lifetime. The love she met in the gaze of the teacher will echo in her soul long after her feet have left these stones behind. It will shape her days. It will whisper to her in the night. It will steady her when the old shadows try to call her back. For when he spoke, he gave not only pardon but power, power to rise and walk a new road, power to leave the dark for the light. And what of the crowd that remained? What did they feel as they watched the accusers slip away, one by one, like leaves carried off by a slow wind? What did they hear in the quiet after his words? Perhaps they felt the sharp edge of truth cut close to their own hearts. For who among them could claim a life without stain? Who among them could stand in the full light of holiness and not tremble? The question he spoke was not only for those who held stones in their hands. It was for all who were ready to condemn another while hiding the weight of their own faults. It was for all who thought that the law was a weapon to wield against others, rather than a mirror to reveal their own need. And so, perhaps some who left that court that day walked with slower steps than before. Perhaps some felt the beginning of humility in their hearts, the first whisper of repentance stirring like a breeze through dry leaves. Jesus stands still for a moment longer, his eyes soft with a depth that words cannot hold. He does not hurry. He does not turn this into a display for applause. He simply remains calm and quiet, as if letting the silence settle like dew on the morning earth. Then, when the last murmurs fade and the last steps echo away, he lifts his gaze to the sky for a moment. The sun is higher now, its light laying bright patterns across the stones. Shadows shorten. The day is opening like a flower, and with it the hearts of those who are willing to hear. If you listen closely in your imagination, you might almost hear the sound of the breeze moving through the colonnades, stirring the folds of his garment, carrying with it the scent of earth and stone warmed by the Sunday. The pigeons flutter softly above the courts, their wings beating like a low drum. In the distance, voices rise from the marketplace, where merchants begin their trade. But here, in this space, there is a quiet strength, a stillness that holds more power than the clash of armies. For mercy has spoken. Grace has stood firm against the storm of accusation. Truth has shone without cruelty. Love has triumphed without violence. Think of the wisdom that flowed from his lips in that one sentence. Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. It was not a denial of the law. It was not a dismissal of justice. It was a revelation of the deeper reality, the reality that all stand in need of grace, that no heart is pure enough to wield condemnation as if it were a sword for others while remaining untouched itself. In those words, he did not only save the woman, he held a mirror before the accusers. He drew them into the light of their own frailty, their own failure, their own hidden stains. And in doing so, he offered them a chance to see themselves truly, a chance to turn, a chance to find the same mercy they were so eager to deny her. Whether they took that chance, the gospel does not tell us. But the opportunity was there, wrapped in those few piercing words. The gospel does not linger on the woman after she leaves. It does not tell us where she went or what her days held. But perhaps it is enough to know that she walked away forgiven, that she walked away free, that she walked away with a command that was also a gift. Go now and leave your life of sin. The words were not harsh. They were not given with the cold weight of demand. They were given like a light for the path, like a gentle hand guiding her away from the edge of a cliff, like a voice calling her out of a dark room into the warmth of morning. They were words that carried possibility. They were words that said, "You are not bound to your past. You are not chained to the shame that held you. There is a new way, and you can walk in it." Rest for a moment in that thought. Let it settle like soft rain on the soil of your heart. How often do we fear that our failures define us? How often do we feel that the stones are already in the hands of those who watch, waiting for the moment to strike? Yet here is a voice that breaks the circle of condemnation. Here is a love that bends low, that stoops to write in the dust rather than cast the first stone. Here is a grace that speaks freedom where fear once reigned. This is the heart of the one who came not to condemn the world but to save it. The one who said that he is the light of the world. The one who calls us not into chains but into life abundant. The sun climbs higher still. The morning deepens. The temple courts glow in the full light of day. People begin to move about their tasks. Some carry water jars on their shoulders. Some lead animals by cords of rope. Children laugh as they chase one another through the shadows of the pillars. Life returns to its ordinary rhythm. Yet for those who saw what happened, the memory will not fade. It will live in their thoughts, a bright thread woven through the fabric of their days. They will remember the teacher stooping low. They will remember the silence broken by words that turned the world upside down. They will remember the sight of stones falling, one by one, like judgments crumbling into dust. They will remember the woman's face as fear gave way to wonder, as shame gave way to hope. And above all, they will remember him, the calm in his eyes, the strength in his stillness, the mercy in his voice. For no one who truly sees him can ever be the same again. The crowd stood completely still, their eyes shifting between Jesus and the accusers, and then settling upon the woman who remained kneeling on the ground. Her hair was loose and tangled. Her clothes clung to her as though weighed down by shame, and the silence that filled the courtyard felt heavy enough to press upon every heart. No one dared speak, for the words Jesus had just uttered still lingered in the air like a breath of wind that carried a truth no one could deny. One by one, the people began to remember their own choices, their own failings that were hidden away from the sight of others. Every mind turned inward, and in that moment, the courtyard was transformed into a place of quiet self-reflection. Those who moments earlier had gripped stones in their hands with stern determination now felt the weight of those stones grow unbearable. Fingers loosened, and the stones dropped to the ground with soft, hollow thuds that seemed louder than any shout. The older ones were the first to step away. Their lives were long, their memories filled with countless days and decisions, and they understood well what it meant to have flaws. Slowly, they moved toward the edge of the courtyard, their steps measured, their hearts stirred. Soon, others followed. The younger ones glancing downward, their faces shadowed with thoughts they could not fully speak aloud. They too dropped their stones and turned to leave, until only a few remained, uncertain, unwilling to meet the gaze of the teacher who sat calmly on the ground, writing still in the dust. And then they as well departed, the sound of sandals fading against the stones of the courtyard, leaving behind only two figures. The woman remained where she was, kneeling upon the earth, her body trembling with quiet sobs that she tried to hide but could not silence completely. And Jesus, the teacher, the one whose voice had spoken peace into storms and life into the weary, sat still for a moment longer, his finger tracing gentle shapes into the dust as the sunlight softened and the shadows stretched across the temple floor. When at last he lifted his head, his eyes met hers. They were eyes that held no harshness, no accusation, only a depth of kindness that reached into the very places where her shame had taken root. She dared not speak, for what words could she bring forth in this moment? Yet even in her silence, his gaze spoke what no other had spoken to her that day. He looked around the courtyard that was now empty and quiet, save for the whisper of the wind and the distant murmur of voices from beyond the temple walls. And then, with a voice as calm as a still morning, he asked, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" His words were gentle, yet they carried the weight of truth. The woman raised her head slowly, her eyes wet with tears that blurred the shapes around her. She looked to the left and to the right, seeing no one but him. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "No one, sir." And then came the words that would echo through the chambers of her heart for as long as breath remained within her. "Neither do I condemn you," he said, his voice rich with grace and mercy that poured over her like a stream of clear water flowing through parched ground. "Go now and leave your life of sin." These words did not strike her as a burden, nor as a command to crush her spirit. They came as an invitation, as a gentle hand extended toward a new path she had never before imagined. In that instant, it was as though the weight that had pressed upon her shoulders lifted, and the darkness that had clouded her heart began to give way to light. The courtyard was silent still, but to her it seemed filled with a quiet song, a melody of forgiveness and hope that wrapped around her like a soft garment. She did not rise immediately. Instead, she knelt there for a little while longer, letting the truth of those words sink deep into the soil of her soul. Jesus said no more, and yet everything had been spoken. He remained seated, calm and steady, his eyes filled with compassion, while she gathered herself slowly, her trembling lessening as peace began to flow where fear had once ruled. As the woman walked through the quiet streets away from the temple, the soft warmth of the morning sun touched her face. Each step felt strange and new, as though she were not the same person who had entered the temple courts just moments before. The weight that had pressed upon her chest for so long, the weight of shame, of fear, of judgment, was gone. It had been lifted by words that she could scarcely believe were hers to receive. The city around her hummed gently with life. Merchants began opening their stalls, arranging small piles of figs, fresh bread, and cloth dyed in deep colours. The aroma of warm bread and fresh herbs drifted through the air, mingling with the scent of the stone streets warmed by the rising Sunday. Children ran past, laughing softly, their feet bare against the rough pavement. Women carrying water jars moved steadily, balancing them on their heads, their steps rhythmic, almost like a quiet dance. The woman noticed these details in a way she never had before. Everything seemed brighter, more alive. The city itself seemed to breathe with a new gentleness, as if the mercy she had received had painted the world in lighter colours. Her mind wandered back to the temple courts, to the moment when the crowd had pressed in around her, when fear had filled every part of her being. She remembered the stones clutched tightly in the hands of the accusers, the anger in their voices, the certainty in their eyes that she deserved punishment. And then she remembered him, the teacher. She remembered the calmness in his movements, the gentleness in his voice, the way he bent down to write in the dust as if time itself had slowed to watch. She realized she could feel his presence still, as though it had wrapped around her and would not let go. The peace she felt was not fleeting. It flowed through her like a quiet stream, steady and endless, touching every corner of her being. Even as the bustling city surrounded her, she felt alone in the best possible way, alone with the memory of mercy and love so deep that it defied all understanding. Her thoughts wandered to the words he had spoken, the ones she would carry forever. Neither do I condemn you. Go now, and leave your life of sin. She turned the phrase over in her mind again and again, feeling their weight and their freedom. They were not merely words. They were a release. They were a call to something greater than herself, a reminder that her past did not define her, that her failures were not final, and that grace was always within reach. As she walked, she thought about what it meant to leave her life of sin. It was not a punishment, it was a gift. She imagined the life ahead of her as a road stretching into the light, a road where she could make choices with new awareness, guided by the mercy she had received. The thought of this freedom was overwhelming, almost too beautiful to comprehend. She had spent so long under the weight of fear and guilt that to imagine stepping lightly, unburdened, seemed almost impossible. And yet, with each step, she felt it growing within her, the steady pulse of hope and renewal. The streets curved and twisted like the threads of her own thoughts. Each corner brought new details, the sound of water from a distant fountain, the scent of spices being carried in baskets, the flicker of sunlight through the leaves of trees planted along the roads. She noticed the small acts of life unfolding around her. A man helping a child reach a jug of water, a young girl braiding another's hair, an elderly woman smiling at a neighbour passing by. These ordinary moments, she realized, carried the same quiet beauty as the mercy she had received. Life continued, and yet life had become infinitely more precious to her. Her mind returned again to the teacher. She wondered what he would think of her as she walked through the city. Would he know that she was striving already to leave the past behind? She imagined his eyes, calm and unwavering, full of understanding, full of kindness. The memory of his voice, so gentle and yet full of authority, whispered to her even now. It was as though a soft, invisible hand rested on her shoulder, guiding her steps and keeping her heart steady. With each step, she felt layers of fear and doubt peeling away. The shame that had once weighed so heavily on her now seemed distant, almost like a shadow she had left behind in the temple courtyard. In its place was a growing sense of self-respect, not born of pride, but born of recognition that she had been seen, truly seen, and that love had reached her when she had least expected it. As the morning progressed, The streets began to fill with more people moving about their daily lives. Merchants called softly to one another. Children played near the fountain, and the sounds of life rose around her like a gentle song. And yet, despite the noise, she felt an inner quiet that no chaos could disturb. It was a serenity born of forgiveness, a calm that was rooted not in ignorance of the world's troubles, but in the deep assurance that she had been offered a new beginning. She paused near a small fountain, the water clear and sparkling in the sunlight. She knelt down, letting her fingers dip into the cool flow. The sensation was refreshing, soothing, and it seemed to carry away the last remnants of fear clinging to her heart. She watched the water ripple around her fingers and thought of her life as a mirror of that flowing water, able to move and shift and find new paths. The mercy she had received, she realized, was like the water flowing, persistent, renewing everything it touched. Even in this simple act, she felt a quiet joy rising in her chest. It was not loud, it was not boisterous, but it was steady and deep, the kind of joy that fills the soul and does not need to announce itself. Her heart felt lighter with every breath. She felt a connection to the life around her that she had never felt before, a recognition that she was part of something far larger than herself, a world that continued to move forward with beauty, order, and the quiet promise of new beginnings. As she rose from the fountain and continued walking, she realized she would carry the memory of that morning for the rest of her life. Every step, every thought, every action would be informed by the gift she had received in the temple. She would remember that mercy had come to her, that love had met her at the moment she was most afraid, and that grace had not only spared her but had invited her into a new way of living. And so she walked on, the streets of the city unfolding before her like a tapestry of light and colour, sound and motion. Yet beneath it all, she felt a quiet, unshakable stillness. It was a stillness that carried with it the assurance of forgiveness, the strength of mercy, and the gentle, enduring presence of the one who had called her out of darkness into light. The path led her past a cluster of olive trees that lined the edge of the street. Their branches swayed gently, casting shadows that danced upon the stones. A soft breeze stirred, carrying with it the faint rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of voices from the marketplace. She paused for a moment beneath the shade, feeling the coolness settle upon her skin, and she closed her eyes to let the quiet speak. In that stillness, her mind lingered on the enormity of what had happened. Mercy. Such a small word, and yet it carried more weight than she could ever measure. It was not just that she had been spared punishment, she had been seen, fully seen, in her deepest shame, and still embraced with compassion. That thought alone made her knees weak, and she reached for the rough bark of the olive tree, steadying herself as her chest swelled with something she had no name for. She tilted her head back, eyes following the branches up toward the sky. The morning had deepened into a brighter blue, and the sunlight spilled through the leaves like drops of gold. She thought of his eyes, eyes that held that same light, eyes that pierced her without wounding, eyes that knew her yet did not turn away. That look would never leave her memory, for it had not only seen her as she was, but had also seen what she could become. A bird fluttered above her, its wings cutting the stillness for just an instant before settling upon a branch. It began to sing, a melody so pure and simple that tears stung her eyes once again. Life seemed to speak to her now in ways it never had before. Every sound, every color, every breath of wind felt like a gentle message. You are free. You are loved. You are new. Her steps carried her away from the shade and back into the golden light. The stones beneath her feet felt warm now, as though they welcomed her forward into a path that had been waiting all along. She walked with no haste. There was no need. Each step was deliberate, an act of acknowledgement, a silent prayer of gratitude. The voices in the marketplace grew louder, mingling with laughter and the calls of vendors announcing their wares. The world was alive, and so was she. As she drew closer to the heart of the city, she noticed the faces of those around her. Some were familiar, faces that might have known her past, faces that might have judged her if they had known what had nearly happened. And yet, for the first time in years, the thought did not fill her with dread. Their opinions no longer held the power they once had, for she had heard the only voice that mattered, the voice that spoke not of condemnation but of release. A small boy tugged at his mother's robe nearby, his laughter spilling like music into the warm air. She watched as the mother bent down, scooping the child into her arms, holding him close with a tenderness that stirred something deep within her. She thought of love, real love, not the broken reflections she had sought in moments of weakness. The love she had seen in his face was not demanding, not taking, not conditional. It was steady. It was whole. It was more than she had ever imagined. And in that moment, she made a silent promise. A promise not just to avoid the path of sin, but to walk toward the fullness of life he had offered her. She would live in a way that honored the gift she had been given, though she knew it would not always be easy. There would be whispers, there would be temptations. There would be days when the memory of her past tried to pull her back into darkness. But she also knew this. She would never be alone again. That thought was like an anchor in her soul, keeping her steady in a sea that once threatened to drown her. As she turned a corner, the city opened up before her, a wide street lined with fig trees, their green leaves shimmering in the sunlight. The fragrance of ripening fruit mingled with the scent of freshly baked bread from a nearby oven. She paused again, letting the aroma fill her senses, grounding her in the present moment. She reached into the small pouch at her side and felt the last of her coins. Not much, but enough for a piece of bread. Enough to remind her that even the simplest gifts of life were now treasures. Approaching the baker's stall, she exchanged a greeting, her voice softer than usual but carrying a new tone, one she barely recognized as her own. She accepted the warm loaf, cradling it in her hands as if it were something sacred. The heat of it seeped into her palms, a reminder that sustenance and grace often come in the humblest forms. She walked to a nearby bench and sat, breaking the bread slowly, savoring each bite. The taste was simple, yet it carried a sweetness she had never noticed before, a sweetness born of gratitude. Around her, life moved on, people haggling over prices, children darting through the streets, travelers passing with donkeys laden with goods, but for her, time had slowed. Every moment felt deliberate. Every breath felt like a prayer. She looked up once more at the sky, where a single cloud drifted lazily across the expanse of blue, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she smiled. Not a fleeting smile born of pretense, but a deep, quiet smile that came from a heart made whole. Her fingers rested on the last piece of bread, but she did not eat it right away. She held it gently, her eyes fixed on the cloud drifting high above, as though it were carrying her thoughts to the heavens. Neither do I condemn you. Go now, and leave your life of sin. Those words rang again in her heart, clear as the first moment she heard them. Neither do I condemn you. She whispered it silently, testing its weight, its shape, its sound in the quietness of her soul. How could those words belong to her? She had stood on the edge of destruction. She had seen death in the eyes of those men who gripped their stones. She had tasted fear so bitter that it dried her throat and made her limbs tremble. And then those words, like cool water in a desert, like a hand pulling her from the depths. She thought of the way he had spoken. There had been no trace of scorn, no sharpness, just truth, firm and yet tender, like a hand that holds without crushing. There was no performance in his tone, no desire to shame her further, only love that refused to leave her as she was. Go now, and leave your life of sin. She let those words settle deep inside her. They were not a command that chained her. They were not a threat. They were an invitation. He had opened a door where she had seen only walls. He had shown her a path where there had been only darkness. She realized then that his words were not only about turning from what was wrong, they were about stepping toward what was right, what was beautiful, what was whole. She closed her eyes, letting the sunlight warm her eyelids. In the darkness behind them, she pictured his face again, the dust swirling faintly at his feet as he bent low, his finger tracing lines in the earth. She wondered what he wrote. She might never know. And perhaps that was not the point. The point was that he stooped low, not just to the ground, but to her place of shame, meeting her where she had fallen, lifting her with nothing but mercy. Her throat tightened as tears formed, but they were not bitter tears now. They were cleansing, washing her from the inside out. She pressed the last piece of bread to her lips, tasting its warmth, and thought how every bite felt like a reminder of life renewed. Neither do I condemn you. Go now, and leave your life of sin. She repeated the words silently, letting them echo like a prayer, like a song she never wanted to forget. They were more than words, they were a promise, a lifeline, a gentle command that spoke of freedom rather than fear. What would leaving her life of sin look like? It would mean more than avoiding old habits. It would mean choosing kindness over selfishness, choosing truth over deceit, choosing hope over despair. She thought of faces people she had hurt, people she had wronged, people who had wronged her. Perhaps, one day, she would seek to make things right. But for now, it began with this: walking forward with a heart that no longer belonged to the shadows. She lifted her gaze and looked at the people passing by. Men carrying baskets of figs, women haggling over jars of oil, children playing with sticks in the dust. Life was ordinary, and yet everything seemed holy now, touched by a grace she had once believed was for others, never for her. She realized that if mercy could find her in her darkest moment, it could find anyone. And perhaps that was why he had let it happen this way, so that not only she, but all who had watched, might learn what grace looks like when it takes on flesh. The sound of laughter drifted from a nearby courtyard where a family was sharing a meal. She smiled softly, thinking of how she would one day tell her own story, not to boast, but to give hope. For if he could forgive her, then no one was beyond forgiveness. No one. The thought brought a deep, quiet strength to her soul. She rose from the bench, brushing crumbs from her hands, and felt the warmth of the bread linger like a blessing. She placed her hand over her heart, almost instinctively, as though to seal his words there forever. Then, with slow, steady steps, she began to walk again, not away from her past, but toward a future she could barely imagine, a future lit by mercy, carried by grace. As she moved through the sunlit streets, her lips shaped the words once more, this time like a whisper carried on the breeze. Neither do I condemn you. Go now, and leave your life of sin. She would speak them to herself again and again, for they were not just a memory, they were her new beginning. Her steps carried her toward the quieter edge of the city, where the streets narrowed and curved like streams winding through stone. Each turn seemed to bring a fresh wave of reflection, as though the world itself had become her teacher, echoing the meaning of his words in every sound and sight. Neither do I condemn you. The phrase pulsed within her like a steady heartbeat, its rhythm aligning with her own. She could feel it in the warmth of the sun on her shoulders, in the whisper of the wind brushing against her hair, in the solid ground beneath her feet that seemed to promise, "You are held. You are safe." She walked past a wall of sun-baked clay, its surface etched with the marks of time. There were tiny vines creeping upward, stubborn in their climb toward light, and as she traced them with her eyes, she thought of her own soul. For so long she had felt rooted in darkness, strangled by guilt and shame. Yet now, like those vines, she sensed a pull towards something brighter, something life-giving. It was not instant, this growth. It would take time. But the pull was real, and that was enough to keep her moving forward. Her thoughts wandered back to that sacred moment in the courtyard, to the sound of stones dropping one by one onto the ground. That sound would stay with her forever, a hollow, ringing release. Those stones had been like the weight of judgment pressing upon her chest, ready to crush her. But he had spoken, and the weight had fallen away. She wondered if those men had understood what happened. Had they felt even a fragment of the mercy she had received? Or had they walked away hardened, clinging to their pride? She hoped, quietly, that they too had heard his words and let them sink deep. For mercy was not just for her, it was for them, for anyone willing to open their hands and let go of the stones they carried. The street curved, leading her to a small garden enclosed by low walls. She paused at its entrance, drawn by the sight of fig trees heavy with fruit and the soft hum of bees drifting among the blossoms. It was a place of stillness, a place where time seemed to slow, and she stepped inside without hesitation. The air was rich with the scent of earth and sweetness, and for a moment she simply breathed, letting the fragrance settle into her spirit like a quiet blessing. She sat beneath one of the trees, its branches arching above like a sheltering canopy. Here, in this gentle shade, her heart could open fully. She closed her eyes and allowed the memory of his face to rise once more. In her mind, the calm strength in his expression, the way his eyes seemed to hold a depth she could not fathom. Those eyes had seen everything, her failures, her pain, her fear, and yet they had not turned away. "Why me?" she whispered into the stillness. It was not a question of doubt, but of wonder. Out of all the voices that had condemned her, his had chosen to speak life. Out of all the hands that could have cast stones, his had drawn in the dust and lifted her instead. She would never understand the fullness of that love, but she would spend the rest of her days living in its light. The hum of bees grew softer as a breeze moved through the garden, rustling the fig leaves like a gentle applause. She listened to it, feeling as though creation itself was affirming the truth she had just begun to grasp. Mercy is stronger than judgment. Grace runs deeper than shame. And the one who spoke those words, he was no ordinary teacher. He carried an authority that came not from force, but from love, a love that stoops low to lift the broken. Her hand drifted to the ground, fingertips pressing into the cool soil. Life was hidden here, beneath the surface roots stretching unseen, feeding the trees that bore such sweetness. She thought of her own life, how the roots of sin had wound deep over the years, entangling her in choices she wished she could undo. And yet now, she felt as though new roots were forming within her, roots of hope, roots of trust. They would take time to grow, but already they were reaching for the living water she had encountered in him. She opened her eyes, lifting them to the canopy above, and whispered again, not in despair this time, but in quiet surrender, "Neither do I condemn you." The words no longer sounded foreign, they felt like home. Slowly, she rose from the ground, brushing the dust from her hands, and stepped back onto the path that would lead her forward. She did not know exactly where it would take her, but she knew this: she would walk it differently now. Each step would be marked by gratitude. Each choice would be guided by the memory of his mercy. As she left the garden, the city stretched before her once more, alive with colour and sound. Vendors called out, offering spices and fabrics. Children darted between stalls, laughter echoing against stone walls. Life pulsed in every direction, and she felt her own pulse beating in harmony with it. A rhythm renewed, a song begun again. She passed a woman carrying a jar of water on her head, and their eyes met for a brief moment. In that glance, she wondered if her own face bore traces of what had happened, if her eyes carried a light that was not there before. She hoped so, not for pride, but for testimony, for the quiet, unspoken story of grace that now defined her. Her thoughts turned again to his words, "Go now, and leave your life of sin." She understood more clearly now they were not words of restriction, but of release, not a burden, but a gift. He was not binding her, he was freeing her from chains she had thought unbreakable, freeing her to live in a way that reflected the mercy she had received. And so, As the sun dipped slightly westward, casting long shadows across the stones, she walked on each step steady, each breath a prayer. The weight of condemnation was gone. The weight of grace was light upon her shoulders, like a cloak woven from threads of love. She whispered one final time as she rounded a bend in the road, her voice soft but certain, "I am not condemned." And with those words, the horizon seemed to widen, as though the whole world had opened before her, waiting to be lived in a new way. She walked on through the streets, carrying the quiet certainty of his words in her heart. With each step, the past felt more distant, the burden of shame replaced by a lightness she had never known. She understood that life would continue with its challenges and its choices, yet she also understood that the mercy she had received had reshaped her entirely. It was a mercy that would guide her, strengthen her, and remind her in every moment that she was never beyond the reach of grace. The city moved around her, alive with sound and colour, yet she felt a profound stillness inside. In that stillness, she carried the memory of being truly seen, of being forgiven, and of being given a path forward she had never imagined. The stones, the crowd, the fear, all were behind her now. What remained was a quiet, enduring light, born of love, mercy, and the promise of a life renewed. And so she walked, letting the warmth of the day and the memory of his eyes guide her, feeling fully alive for the first time in years, and ready to embrace all that life would offer from this moment onward. Now, let me tell you the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, a story that comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verses 1 to 10. It is a story about hope, about change, and about the incredible love of Jesus that can reach anyone, no matter how far they have wandered. So settle in and let us journey together into the streets of Jericho on a day that would change Zacchaeus' life forever. Our story begins in the bustling city of Jericho, a city that rests in the warmth of the Jordan Valley. The morning sun has just risen, spilling its golden light across the mud brick houses and narrow streets. The air is rich with the scent of fresh figs, baking bread, and the earthy smell of the river that winds nearby. Merchants are beginning to open their stalls, their voices soft at first, calling out the day's offerings of fruit, oil, and cloth, dyed in shades of deep red and indigo. Children run between the legs of passers-by, their laughter delicate and fleeting, like wind chimes caught in a gentle breeze. Amid this daily life, there is a man whose story we are about to explore. His name is Zacchaeus. He is a tax collector, a man whose wealth is known across the city, and whose presence is met with distrust and quiet disdain by most of the people around him. For Zacchaeus, life has always been a balance of power and isolation, comfort and loneliness. He lives in a house that is larger than most in Jericho, filled with the trappings of wealth. Polished jars of olive oil, small wooden tables covered in cloth, and coins stacked neatly in clay vessels. Yet, despite the abundance surrounding him, there is a quiet emptiness within, a longing he does not speak aloud. Zacchaeus is a small man, not in presence alone, but in stature, and the city streets, crowded as they are, feel enormous and overwhelming to him. The people pass by, some with eyes averted, others with quiet murmurs. They are wary of him, for he collects taxes on behalf of Rome, and the work he does often leaves others feeling cheated and burdened. It is a life of numbers and coin, contracts and complaints, yet beneath it all is a man who is hungry for something more than wealth, for something that money cannot buy. Every morning he walks through the streets with a careful gait, mindful of the shadows of judgment that fall upon him. He observes the women carrying water jars, the men leading donkeys laden with goods, the children chasing one another through the dust. Each step is deliberate, measured, as if the ground itself might betray him. His heart feels heavy with the knowledge that though he has acquired riches, he has also gained something far less desirable, a reputation that isolates him from the warmth of community. And yet, there is a curiosity within him, a spark that will not be extinguished by the daily grind of coins and calculations. Zacchaeus wonders quietly about the people he sees, about the families who gather at dawn to share bread, about the laughter that flows so easily among neighbours. He wonders if such joy is meant only for them, or if it might, in some mysterious way, be possible for him too. The thought is both thrilling and terrifying, for it challenges the very structure of his life, the careful walls he has built to protect himself. On this particular morning, the streets are alive with whispers and excitement. Word has spread that a teacher named Jesus is passing through Jericho, a man whose words have stirred crowds and whose presence has brought hope to the weary. Zacchaeus hears the whispers as he counts coins at the threshold of his home, his sharp eyes catching the flutter of movement, the murmured conversations carried by the wind. Who is this man? Why does everyone speak of him with such reverence? A part of him shivers at the thought, for he senses that something in him, something hidden and restless, has been awakened by the mere mention of the teacher. He steps outside, adjusting the folds of his robe, and walks through the streets toward the commotion. His heart beats faster than usual, not from physical exertion, but from anticipation and a quiet, unspoken hope. Could this man be different? Could he see beyond the walls Zacchaeus has built, beyond the coins he has counted, beyond the fear and isolation that have clung to him for so long? The streets are crowded now, filled with people eager to glimpse Jesus. Zacchaeus moves cautiously, navigating the throng with nimble steps, his eyes searching for a way to see the teacher. He is small, and the crowd presses around him, taller bodies blocking his line of sight. He feels the familiar frustration rising within him, the pang of being overlooked, of being unseen. And yet today, that frustration is accompanied by a daring thought. I will find a way. I must see him. He looks around and notices a sycamore tree that stands near the path Jesus is taking. Its trunk is wide and its branches extend outward and upward, leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The tree offers a possibility, a chance to rise above the crowd and finally behold the one whose presence has stirred such curiosity and quiet longing within him. Zacchaeus hesitates, only for a moment, then makes a decision that surprises even himself. He will climb the tree. He will lift himself above the murmuring crowd. And there, perhaps, he will see something he has not been able to see before. As he begins to climb, the rough bark pressing against his palms, the branches swaying slightly under his weight. He feels a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. What will it be like to finally see this teacher? Will he notice me? Will he look upon me with disdain, or will there be something else, something gentler, something that calls to the parts of me I have long hidden? From his vantage point, above the crowd, the city spreads before him in a panorama of life and colour. The streets wind like threads of gold in the morning sun, the rooftops warm and inviting, the people below moving like ripples across a calm pond. Zacchaeus feels a shift within him, as though being lifted physically has also lifted something deep inside, allowing a small glimmer of hope to reach the surface. And there, in the midst of this ordinary yet extraordinary scene, he waits. The branches sway gently above him, carrying with them the scent of the earth, the warmth of the morning, the soft hum of life continuing around him. His thoughts turn inward, reflecting on the choices he has made, the ways he has hurt and been hurt, the loneliness he has accepted as inevitable. And yet now, for the first time in many years, he dares to believe that something may be possible that he had not allowed himself to hope for. A glimpse of mercy, a moment of grace, a chance to be seen not as a tax collector, not as a man who has accumulated wealth at the cost of reputation, but simply as a human being, worthy of attention and care. As the crowd grows denser and the sound of voices rises around him, Zacchaeus tightens his grip on the branches, feeling the rough texture against his palms. He takes a deep breath, steadying his heart, and prepares himself for the moment he has waited for. He does not yet know how his life will change, what will be said, or how the teacher will respond. All he knows is that he is ready, that he has climbed to this height with purpose, and that something in him has shifted something tender, fragile, and hopeful. And there he waits, the city humming below, the sun warming his face, the leaves whispering around him, his heart full of a quiet expectation. For in this moment, everything is possible, and Zacchaeus feels, for the first time in a long time, that he is exactly where he is meant to be. From his perch in the sycamore tree, Zacchaeus could hear the sounds of the crowd growing louder as they anticipated the teacher's arrival. The air was thick with murmurs of excitement and curiosity, a mixture of anticipation and awe that seemed to hum beneath the warmth of the Sunday. Voices rose and fell like gentle waves, carrying fragments of words about miracles, healings, and wisdom. Zacchaeus felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from a growing awareness that something extraordinary was approaching. His fingers rested on the rough bark, grounding him to the tree as he watched the movement of the people below. Some looked up at the branches, noticing his small figure perched above them, and muttered under their breath. There was surprise, there was judgment, and perhaps even amusement in their tones. But Zacchaeus paid little attention to the murmurs. His gaze was fixed ahead, seeking the figure that had drawn the hearts of many. His curiosity was now mingled with hope and a quiet tremor of anticipation that made his chest feel both light and tight at the same time. The city streets stretched before him like a tapestry of life and motion. Children darted between the legs of adults, their laughter clear and melodic, a sound that seemed to rise above the hum of the crowd. Merchants adjusted their wares, calling out gently to those who passed, the scents of spices and fresh bread mingling in the warm morning air. Donkeys shifted beneath the weight of their burdens, braying softly, their steps careful on the stone streets. And yet, all of this faded in the awareness that Zacchaeus held. Jesus was near, moving through the city with calm authority, drawing attention without demanding it, presence without pushing. He thought again of the stories he had heard, the healings, the teachings, the attention given to the marginalized. A strange sensation tugged at him, something like both longing and fear. What would it be like to be seen by this man, this teacher who spoke not with judgment but with understanding? Would he look through the armor Zacchaeus had built over the years, the armor of wealth, of cunning, of careful calculation, and see the longing beneath? Would he see the part of Zacchaeus that had been ignored, rejected, and unseen by almost everyone else in his life? The crowd shifted as the sound of footsteps approached. Zacchaeus leaned slightly forward, gripping the tree as he strained to see, his heart beating faster with every step. The teacher was coming, walking slowly and deliberately, surrounded by those who followed him with both reverence and curiosity. Zacchaeus caught the glimpse of his face, calm and radiant, and in that instant the small figure in the tree felt as if the weight of the world had shifted. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, but there was a stillness that Zacchaeus sensed in the presence of Jesus, a quiet that seemed to fall over the people like a soft veil. And then their eyes met. The teacher lifted his gaze, scanning the crowd with a depth that seemed to pierce the layers Zacchaeus had carefully built around himself. Zacchaeus's breath caught, for in that gaze there was recognition, an understanding that did not judge but simply acknowledged. It was as if the very core of his being had been seen, not with disdain, but with something entirely different. Acceptance, notice, and perhaps even an invitation. And then came the words, spoken with a clarity that made Zacchaeus' heart leap. "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Time seemed to pause for a moment. The words echoed in his mind, ringing clear and unbroken, vibrating through every corner of his thoughts. He had not expected to hear his name spoken, certainly not with such personal knowledge and authority. The surprise, the disbelief, the wonder all mingled in a sensation that left him momentarily breathless. Every sound of the city, the chatter, the clattering of carts, the laughter of children faded into the background as the words sank deeply into his heart. He looked around at the faces in the crowd, noticing the sharp glances, the murmurs of surprise and doubt. Some whispered, questioning why the teacher would choose to go to the house of a man like him, a tax collector, a man whose life was marked by suspicion and rejection. Others appeared irritated, perhaps even angry, that Jesus would honor someone they considered unworthy. Yet, Zacchaeus felt no anger, no shame this time, only a rising, quiet exhilaration that something entirely new was unfolding. He descended the tree quickly, moving with a mixture of urgency and reverence. Each step was careful but deliberate, guided by a mixture of excitement and humility. When his feet touched the ground, the sounds of the city returned, the shuffle of feet, the calls of merchants, the soft braying of donkeys, but they seemed different now, softer, less pressing, as if the world itself had shifted to accommodate the moment. Zacchaeus' mind raced with questions, reflections, and wonder. What would it be like to host the teacher in his home? How would he prepare, not with grandeur, but with sincerity, for someone who saw far beyond appearances and wealth? He thought of his small, orderly house, the clay vessels neatly stacked, the coins carefully counted, and he realized that none of these things mattered in the way he had once thought. What mattered was honesty, humility, and a willingness to be seen as he truly was. He moved quickly down the narrow streets toward his home, each step an outward reflection of the inner transformation already beginning within him. He felt a strange lightness in his chest, a release of tension he had carried for years. The excitement of hosting Jesus mingled with a deep, contemplative thought. Perhaps this encounter would change him in ways he could not yet imagine. Perhaps it would reshape not only his day but his entire life. As he reached his door, Zacchaeus paused for a moment, taking in the quiet stillness of the house. The early morning sunlight streamed through small windows, illuminating the rooms with a gentle glow. Dust motes danced lazily in the light, and the air carried the faint scent of olive oil and clay. He opened the door, stepping inside with a careful reverence, as if crossing a threshold into something sacred, though the room appeared ordinary in every sense. He moved to prepare a place for the teacher, adjusting simple mats and cushions, arranging vessels of water, and ensuring there was a seat that would offer comfort without grandeur. Each action, though small, carried meaning. Zacchaeus realized that it was not the outward display that mattered, but the heart with which it was offered. He was eager to serve, not to impress, and that simple desire filled him with anticipation and humility. Sitting briefly in one quiet corner, Zacchaeus reflected on the life he had lived. Years of collecting taxes, of acquiring wealth, of standing apart from the people he longed to know. He remembered the faces of those he had once counted on for respect or fear, and he recognized that much of his life had been spent in isolation, protecting himself with coins and contracts. And now, in this extraordinary moment, a door had opened, offering something far beyond his calculations, a chance to be seen, to be understood, to be transformed. He leaned back, letting the gentle warmth of the morning sun filter through the windows, and whispered silently to himself, "I will not waste this moment. I will not let it pass without receiving what is offered." His voice was soft, almost a prayer, carrying a quiet determination that seemed to resonate in the very walls of the house. Outside, the sounds of Jericho continued a soft chorus of daily life, unbroken and persistent. Yet inside Zacchaeus' heart, there was a stillness that surpassed all noise, a quiet that allowed him to prepare fully, not just in action, but in spirit. For he understood, in a way he had never before, that this encounter was not simply about hospitality or protocol. It was about the possibility of change, the invitation to new life, and the recognition that the grace he sought had already reached for him. And so he waited, anticipation and awe mingling within him, every breath a reminder that something profound was about to unfold, something that would touch not only his life but the lives of all those around him and perhaps even the life of the city itself. The moment had come. Zacchaeus, having prepared his home with care and attention, stood just inside the doorway, feeling a mixture of anticipation, nervousness, and awe. The city's hum, merchants calling, donkeys shifting, children laughing filtered faintly through the walls. But inside his home there was a stillness that seemed to press against the air like a sacred hush. His heart beat steadily, though faster than he could measure, as he waited for the teacher to arrive, knowing that nothing about this encounter would be ordinary. And then he entered. Jesus stepped into the house with a quiet assurance, not grand, not loud, yet commanding presence in the most unusual and subtle way. Every step he took seemed to carry weight without burden, a calm authority that did not need to demand attention because attention was drawn naturally. His eyes scanned the room, not harsh or critical, but soft and full of understanding, landing gently upon Zacchaeus as though reading the unspoken thoughts of his heart. Zacchaeus felt something shift within him immediately. There was no judgment, no reproach, no look of disgust at the tax collector who had long been labelled a sinner in the eyes of the crowd. Instead, there was recognition, a seeing that penetrated layers of shame and isolation that he had carried for years. It was a gaze that did not condemn, that did not accuse, but seemed to say simply, "I know you, and I am here." The room seemed to breathe with them. The sunlight through the small windows fell in golden patches across the floor, illuminating the simple furnishings, the clay vessels, the mats, and cushions arranged carefully by Zacchaeus. Every object, humble as it was, felt suffused with significance. The ordinary had become extraordinary simply because of his presence, and Zacchaeus felt it in every fibre of his being. Jesus spoke, his voice calm, melodic, and precise, as though each word was placed with intention. He did not begin with rebuke, did not demand explanation, did not dwell on what had been, but addressed Zacchaeus directly, fully, wholly. And in his words, Zacchaeus felt both challenge and invitation. A challenge to honesty, a call to reflection, and an open doorway to transformation. Zacchaeus, for the first time in many years, felt the full weight of his life laid bare, not in accusation, not in shame, but in awareness. He thought of the countless transactions he had overseen, the coins that had passed through his hands, the measures of silver he had kept for himself, the ways he had overstepped in pursuit of wealth. And yet, he also felt that none of these revelations were meant to crush him, but rather to illuminate a path toward wholeness. Every sound of Jesus' voice, every subtle gesture, every calm glance felt like a balm, soothing layers of fear and tension he had carried like armor for decades. The rush of emotion threatened to overwhelm him, yet it was gentle, quiet, almost imperceptible at first, growing steadily into a recognition of hope and possibility. Zacchaeus listened intently as the teacher spoke of God's kingdom, of mercy, and of love that reaches where human judgment cannot. He reflected on the words, turning them over in his mind, savoring their depth, their honesty, their simplicity. Jesus did not speak in condemnation. He spoke in truth, revealing the opportunity for change that lay hidden within every moment. A stillness settled over Zacchaeus as he considered the reality of what was happening. He had expected confrontation, perhaps chastisement, possibly even dismissal. But instead, he found acceptance. And in that acceptance, he discovered the courage to look inward, to face the choices he had made, the actions he had taken, and the person he had become. The conversation turned, gently, to his own heart. Zacchaeus felt compelled to confess, not out loud at first, but internally, acknowledging the wrongs he had committed, the greed he had embraced, and the isolation he had accepted as normal. Each recognition was paired with an unspoken desire to make amends, to align his life with a path of honesty, compassion, and generosity. And then, almost instinctively, he spoke. His voice was soft, trembling slightly with the weight of vulnerability, yet firm with intention. "Lord, I will give half of my possessions to the poor," he said, "and if I have cheated anyone, I will pay back 4 times the amount." The words left his lips with a sense of release, a quiet joy that carried with it both relief and anticipation. It was as though a great burden had been lifted, and the air itself seemed lighter in the room. Jesus listened, his gaze steady and full of gentle approval, yet never demanding more than Zacchaeus offered willingly. There was no judgment of what had been, no insistence on perfection, only recognition of the turning, the transformation taking root in Zacchaeus' heart. And in that recognition, Zacchaeus felt something he had longed for but had never dared hope to feel: freedom. Freedom from the chains of reputation, from fear, from isolation, from the burden of shame he had carried so faithfully for so many years. The room seemed to grow warmer, not with heat, but with presence, with awareness. Each breath Zacchaeus took was infused with a sense of possibility, a deep and resonant certainty that life could be different. He thought of his home, the streets of Jericho, the people he had passed by without truly seeing, and he realized, with a growing awe, that his life could now ripple outward, touching others with the same mercy he had just experienced. The people outside, walking past his house, would notice soon enough that something had changed. Zacchaeus himself would notice it in the way his heart responded to daily life, in the way he began to look at others with eyes not tainted by greed or suspicion, but softened by the possibility of grace. He understood, more deeply than he had ever understood anything before, that wealth was not evil in itself, but the love of wealth above all else had been his blindfold. Now that it had been lifted, he saw clearly, and he saw opportunity not for accumulation, but for restoration, for generosity, for goodness. Jesus spoke again, softly, and yet each word resonated deeply within Zacchaeus. Today salvation has come to this house, because this man, too, is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Zacchaeus felt tears well in his eyes, unbidden and pure, not of sorrow alone, but of gratitude, humility, and awe. To be called a son of Abraham was to be recognized, affirmed, included a promise that he could belong, fully and completely, not by the coins in his hand, but by the choice of his heart. He reflected on that phrase over and over, letting it sink into his bones. Salvation has come. He had imagined redemption in abstract terms, in sermons or distant teachings, but now it was tangible, immediate, personal. The teacher had entered his home, looked upon him, and declared transformation, mercy, and acceptance. He felt as though a veil had been lifted from the window of his soul, allowing light to flood in for the very first time. Zacchaeus could not hold back a quiet, almost involuntary laugh, a sound mingling relief, joy, and amazement. It surprised him, this capacity for happiness, for genuine, untethered delight. He had long thought that such feelings were reserved for others, for those who lived upright, visible, and respected lives. And now he understood that mercy had no boundaries, that grace reached into the hearts of all who dared to be honest, all who were willing to be seen, and all who were ready to turn. He moved closer to Jesus, still overwhelmed but emboldened by the assurance he had been given. The teacher's presence seemed to fill the room, not by force or volume, but by a calm radiance that touched every corner, every thought, every secret corner of Zacchaeus' heart. He knew that what had begun in this house that morning would extend beyond its walls, into the streets, into his relationships, and into every action he would take from that moment onward. Zacchaeus' gaze shifted to the windows, to the sunlit city beyond, and he pictured the people he had passed each day without truly seeing the beggars, the weary, the neighbors he had ignored or wronged. A new commitment formed within him, a quiet resolve to live differently, to act with integrity, to extend kindness and fairness wherever he could. The encounter had been immediate, direct, transformative, and it left him with the sense that life itself had been rewoven, thread by thread, in ways he had never imagined. For the first time, Zacchaeus understood the depth of the teacher's mission: to seek the lost, to bring light where there had been darkness, to offer a hand where despair had held tight. And he realized that he was no longer outside that circle, no longer merely a spectator of grace, but an active participant, chosen to experience, to embody, and to share it in the life that awaited him. And so, as the morning continued, Zacchaeus sat with Jesus in his home, listening, reflecting, and absorbing a truth that would remain with him forever. Every word, every gesture, every moment of presence was a seed planted deep in his soul, a seed that would grow into actions, choices, and a life aligned with the light he had finally seen. In that quiet, sun-filled room, transformation had begun, profound and enduring, and the world beyond waited, bright and full of promise, for the steps Zacchaeus would take next. Zacchaeus hurried through the streets with a heart that felt as if it might leap out of his chest. The sun was beginning to dip, casting a golden hue over Jericho's rooftops. People still murmured in the streets, some glaring at him, others simply puzzled by the day's events. But Zacchaeus hardly noticed them now. All he could think about was the honor of hosting Jesus under his roof. The courtyard of Zacchaeus' house opened wide, and servants stood in stunned silence as their master burst in, his fine robes dusty from his climb earlier. His voice was loud and trembling. "Prepare the table. Make ready the best we have, for the teacher is coming here." The servants exchanged glances, unsure if they had heard correctly. Their master, who guarded his wealth with such jealousy, who had never entertained anyone without strict regard for profit or status, was now opening his home in a rush for a wandering teacher. They obeyed, though questions lingered in their eyes. Zacchaeus began pacing the stone floor. His fingers drummed against the wooden beams, and his heart raced in anticipation. He glanced toward the door, half afraid this might all be a dream and that Jesus would never come. Yet from beyond the courtyard wall came voices and footsteps. The door opened, and there he was. Jesus stepped inside with a calm presence that seemed to soften even the hard edges of the house. His eyes carried peace, his manner radiated warmth. He greeted Zacchaeus as if they had known each other all their lives. For a moment, Zacchaeus simply stood still, breathless, overwhelmed by the reality of his presence. "Welcome, Lord," Zacchaeus said, his voice trembling with sincerity. "Welcome to my home." Jesus smiled, and with that simple gesture, the house seemed brighter. Zacchaeus led him into the dining area, where servants were spreading fine cloth across the table. Platters of figs, olives, and roasted lamb were being set down, and pitchers of the finest wine gleamed in the lamplight. As the two sat down, a crowd began to gather outside. The murmurs grew louder, sharper, filled with disdain. "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." The words pierced through the walls, but Jesus remained serene, and Zacchaeus felt a growing resolve in his heart. He could not let this moment pass. He could not remain the same man he had been that morning. He stood up slowly, his hands trembling, his eyes moist. His voice rose above the whispers outside. "Lord," he said, and his voice grew stronger with each word. "Look, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor." His heart surged as he spoke, for he meant every word. "And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." The room fell silent. Even the voices outside seemed to hush for a breathless moment. The servants froze where they stood. This was no small vow. This was ruin to a man whose life had been built upon hoarding wealth. Yet Zacchaeus' face glowed, not with fear, but with joy. Jesus looked at him with eyes that saw everything, every choice, every longing, every act of greed, and now every spark of redemption. Then he spoke words that would never leave Zacchaeus' soul. "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." The weight of those words settled on everyone present. For Zacchaeus, it was as if shackles had fallen from his soul. No longer was he the despised tax collector, the man chained to his wealth and shame. He was restored, embraced, called a son of Abraham. Tears blurred his vision. He stepped closer to Jesus, and though his lips could barely form the words, his heart cried out, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for calling me by name when no one else believed I was worth saving." Outside, the murmuring crowd began to drift away, some scoffing, others stunned into silence. Inside, a banquet unlike any other was unfolding, not because of the food on the table, but because grace itself had taken a seat in Zacchaeus' home. That night, laughter and conversation filled the air. For the first time in years, Zacchaeus laughed without the shadow of guilt. He listened as Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God, a kingdom not bought with coins but given freely to those who would humble themselves and believe. Zacchaeus felt as though his entire life had been leading to this moment, to this table, to this Saviour who had looked up into a tree and seen more than a man's stature. He had seen a soul ready to be redeemed. As the lamps flickered and the night deepened, Zacchaeus realized something profound. Everything he had thought mattered: wealth, position, security was nothing compared to the joy now flooding his heart. The house of Zacchaeus was filled with a quiet, holy stillness, as Jesus spoke words that would echo in eternity. Outside, the murmurs of the crowd had grown faint. The evening light streamed in through the small windows, casting long golden beams across the room. Everything seemed different now. It was the same house, the same walls, but something had shifted deep within Zacchaeus' soul. He stood there, trembling not from fear, but from a flood of emotions that words could hardly express. A deep peace settled over him like a gentle cloak. For the first time in his life, he felt truly alive, truly known, and truly loved. He had always believed wealth could fill the emptiness inside. Every coin he had taken, every deal he had made, every tax he had collected unjustly, it was all an attempt to silence that deep longing. But none of it worked. And now, here was the answer he had been searching for, not in gold or silver, but in the presence of the Son of God. Zacchaeus' eyes glistened with tears as he turned toward Jesus. His voice shook, but it carried a strength born from conviction. "Lord," he said, his words slow and deliberate, "look, here and now, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." The room fell silent. The servants froze. They looked at one another in disbelief. This was Zacchaeus, the man who had built his fortune on greed, now promising to give it away. Jesus looked at him with eyes full of joy. He smiled, and in that smile was the approval Zacchaeus had never received from anyone before. "Today," Jesus said, his voice warm and firm, "salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Those words were like living water to Zacchaeus' thirsty soul. A son of Abraham. For years he had been treated as an outcast, despised by his own people. He had been called a sinner, a traitor, an enemy. But now Jesus restored him not just as a man, but as one belonging to God's family. Tears spilled freely down his cheeks. He fell to his knees, not because anyone told him to, but because his heart could no longer contain the gratitude that surged within him. He bowed his head, whispering words of praise through sobs of joy. In that moment, his priorities changed forever. The coins stored in his chests, the ledgers stacked in the corner, the wealth he had clung to, they no longer defined him. They were no longer his treasure. His true treasure sat before him, speaking life into his brokenness. Outside, the night had fallen over Jericho. The stars began to pierce through the dark velvet sky. People still whispered in the streets, wondering why Jesus had chosen the house of a tax collector. But inside, heaven was rejoicing. Zacchaeus rose to his feet, renewed, transformed, reborn. He moved through his house like a man on a mission. He called for his servants, giving instructions to prepare lists of every person he had wronged. For hours he worked, not out of obligation, but out of love. Love for the one who had given him grace when no one else would. The night grew late, but his heart was wide awake. He pictured the faces of the poor who would receive help, the families who would rejoice because of the restitution he would make. And above all, he pictured Jesus' face, the smile, the voice, the words that had changed everything. He knew his life would never be the same again. He had gone up the sycamore tree to see who Jesus was, and he had come down a different man. In the quiet stillness of that sacred night, as oil lamps flickered and the desert winds whispered beyond the walls, Zacchaeus realized something profound. What he had found was worth more than all the riches of Jericho combined. He whispered to himself, his heart swelling with gratitude. He sought me. He called me by name, and he saved me. And somewhere beyond the starlit sky, the angels rejoiced, for a lost soul had been found. The sun had set on that unforgettable day, but its glow never left Zacchaeus' soul. He had gone to bed that night, not as the man he once was, a man of greed, mistrust, and isolation, but as a man reborn. And yet, the story did not end there. For what Jesus planted in Zacchaeus that day would continue to grow and bear fruit in the years that followed. In the days immediately after the encounter, Jericho buzzed with conversation. The city was alive with whispers and questions. Everyone who had seen Jesus enter Zacchaeus' home, and even those who had only heard rumors, could not stop talking about it. "Did you hear what he did?" Some said. "He gave half his wealth to the poor." Others were still in shock. "And he promised to repay 4 times what he stole." Who does that? Neighbors who once despised him watched as Zacchaeus moved through the streets with a different posture. There was no longer the stiff arrogance that used to make him unapproachable. Now there was a softness in his steps, a lightness in his face. For the first time, he greeted people without expectation of payment, without fear of ridicule. The next morning, he opened his doors wide. His servants looked on, stunned, as he began giving away the possessions he once hoarded. Silks, coins, jars of oil, precious items from foreign lands, all were carried out and placed into the hands of those in need. Children who had gone to bed hungry the night before woke to find their mothers holding baskets of food delivered from Zacchaeus' house. For the poor of Jericho, it was a day of astonishment and gratitude. For Zacchaeus, it was a day of joy unlike any he had ever known. Each time he gave something away, he felt freer. Each time he paid back someone he had wronged, he felt a burden lift. It was as if the chains that had once bound his heart were breaking, one generous act at a time. Weeks passed, then months. People began to notice something unusual. Zacchaeus was not returning to his old ways. Many thought his generosity would last only a few days, that he was caught up in the excitement of the moment. But no, his transformation was real. He had burned the bridges to his former life, and there was no going back. Soon, he was no longer called the chief tax collector in conversation. People began to call him brother, friend, even servant of God. Some were still cautious. unsure if they could truly trust him. But Zacchaeus did not let that discourage him. He understood that trust takes time to heal. He began to spend his days helping the poor, visiting the sick, and giving counsel to the lost. People who were broken, ashamed, or trapped in sin sought him out not because he was wealthy, but because he understood what it meant to be forgiven. He knew what it felt like to be looked down upon and still be seen by Jesus. And so, Zacchaeus opened his life to others with the same grace he had received. Years rolled on, and Jericho changed too. The name Zacchaeus, once a symbol of greed and oppression, became a name spoken with warmth and gratitude. Travelers passing through the city would sometimes hear his story and marvel. Is this the same man who once cheated his own people? And the locals would smile and say, yes, but he met the teacher one day, and nothing was ever the same. As Zacchaeus grew older, he often sat by his window, watching the road where it all began. The sycamore tree still stood, its branches stretching toward the sky. Children played beneath it, unaware of the day when a desperate man had climbed it, longing for something more. He would sometimes walk to that tree and rest his hand on its bark, whispering prayers of gratitude for the day that changed everything. And he never forgot the words Jesus spoke. Today salvation has come to this house. Those words became his anchor in every season. Whenever life grew hard, whenever doubt crept in, Zacchaeus remembered that Jesus had not only seen him in the tree, he had seen his heart, his potential, his worth. In his final years, Zacchaeus became a living testimony of grace. Parents told their children his story to teach them about the power of repentance and the kindness of God. Some said that Zacchaeus helped plant one of the earliest gatherings of believers in Jericho, hosting them in his own home, the same home where Jesus had once brought salvation. And when Zacchaeus' time on earth came to an end, the city mourned. They buried him near that sycamore tree, the symbol of his turning point, so that generations to come would remember. And indeed, they did. For long after Zacchaeus was gone, people pointed to the tree and said, "That is where a sinner met the Savior. That is where a story of greed became a story of grace." And so it was that a man who climbed a tree just to catch a glimpse of Jesus found not only the sight he longed for, but the salvation of his soul. Now, let us take a deep look at these powerful stories and see what it means for us today. The story of the woman caught in adultery is not just a moment from the past. It speaks to us in the present because it deals with things we all understand: mistakes, shame, judgment, mercy, and second chances. Jesus was teaching in the temple courts when a group of religious leaders dragged in a woman. They said she was caught in the very act of adultery. Imagine the fear in her eyes, the whispers in the crowd, the harsh tone of the accusers. They did not bring her because they cared about the law or about her. They wanted to trap Jesus. They wanted to see what he would do. And then Jesus did something amazing. He bent down and wrote on the ground. He did not shout. He did not argue. He simply said, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." One by one, the accusers walked away. Jesus looked at the woman and said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." This moment is full of lessons that can change how we see ourselves and how we treat others. Let us explore these lessons deeply. 1. Everyone makes mistakes, and that includes us. The first lesson is that no one is perfect. We live in a world where it is easy to judge others, to point fingers when someone fails. Social media makes this worse. If someone does something wrong, people attack them online. But in this story, Jesus reminds us that we all have flaws. He said, "Let anyone without sin throw the first stone." That means before we criticize someone else, we need to look at our own lives. Think about your day. Maybe you lost your temper with someone at work. Maybe you ignored a friend who needed you. Maybe you spoke badly about someone behind their back. These may not seem as serious as what the woman did, but they are still wrong. If we are honest, we all need grace. So, when someone makes a mistake, instead of judging, we can show understanding. In everyday life, if your friend tells you they messed up, instead of saying, "How could you do that?" say, "I understand. I've made mistakes too." If someone at work fails on a project, instead of gossiping, think about times you failed and how you wished someone supported you. 2. God's mercy is greater than our shame. The woman must have felt so ashamed. She was standing in front of a crowd, accused and humiliated. Maybe you know what shame feels like. Maybe you have done something you are not proud of. Maybe you keep replaying it in your mind and thinking, "I am not good enough." This story tells us something beautiful. Jesus did not condemn her. He showed mercy. He gave her another chance. That is what He does for us too. When we fail, He does not say, "You are finished." He says, "Come to me. I can forgive you. I can help you start again." In everyday life, when you make a mistake at work, instead of saying, "I am a failure," remind yourself, "I made a mistake, but I can learn and grow." When you feel guilty about something in your past, talk to God and accept His forgiveness instead of living in shame. Mercy is stronger than shame, and when we accept God's mercy, we can also give mercy to others. 3. Do not rush to judge people by their worst moment. The religious leaders saw the woman as an adulterer. That was her label. But Jesus saw more. He saw a person who could change. He saw someone valuable, someone loved by God. This happens all the time today. We often define people by their mistakes. If someone lies once, we call them a liar. If someone fails in school, we say they are not smart. But people are more than their worst moments. In everyday life, if your friend hurts you, do not define them by that mistake. Look at their heart, their good qualities. If you fail at something, do not define yourself by that failure. One failure does not mean your life is over. Jesus saw potential in the woman, and He sees potential in you too. 4. Change is possible when we encounter grace. Jesus did not say, "I forgive you, so keep living the same way." He said, "Go and leave your life of sin." That means forgiveness is not permission to keep doing wrong. It is an invitation to change. Sometimes we think, "I can never change. This is just who I am." But this story tells us that real change is possible. When we experience love and grace, it gives us the strength to live differently. In everyday life, if you struggle with anger, remember that God can help you become more patient. If you have a habit you want to break, do not give up. With God's help, you can change. 5. We should speak words that heal, not words that hurt. The religious leaders used their words to shame the woman. Jesus used his words to heal her. Our words have power. They can build someone up or tear someone down. In everyday life, when someone apologizes, say, "Thank you for telling me. I forgive you," instead of holding a grudge. When your child or sibling makes a mistake, say, "You can do better next time," instead of calling them names. Words can either throw stones or open doors of hope. Choose the words that heal. This story teaches us that we all need grace, that mercy is stronger than judgment, and that change is possible when love is present. It reminds us not to judge others, not to define people by their mistakes, and to speak words that heal. Imagine how different the world would be if we all lived this way. Less gossip, less hate, more compassion, more forgiveness. The story of the woman caught in adultery is not just about her, it is about us. Because we all need mercy, and we all have the chance to give it to others. Now let us turn our attention to the second remarkable story, one that speaks to transformation, forgiveness, and the way God meets us exactly where we are. This is the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, a man whose life seemed hopelessly bound to greed and isolation until he encountered Jesus. Like the woman caught in adultery, Zacchaeus' story is more than history. It is a guide for our own lives, filled with lessons we can apply every day. Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector in Jericho, a city bustling with travelers, merchants, and traders. He was rich because he collected more than was fair, keeping a portion for himself. People despised him, not only because of his dishonesty, but also because he was seen as a collaborator with the Roman authorities, someone who profited while others suffered. It would have been easy for him to think that his life was over, that he was too corrupt, too alone, too despised to ever experience love or acceptance. But one day, he heard that Jesus was passing through Jericho. Curiosity stirred in him. He wanted to see this man whom everyone talked about, the man who spoke differently, who healed the sick, who forgave sinners. Yet Zacchaeus was short of stature, and the crowd was thick. He could not see above the heads of others. So, in a move both humble and determined, he climbed a sycamore tree to get a better view. It was a small act, almost comical if seen from the outside, but it revealed something deep inside him, a desire for something better, a longing for more than wealth or comfort. Jesus looked up, saw him, and said, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Imagine the shock Zacchaeus must have felt. Jesus knew his name. Not only that, but he wanted to enter his home. He wanted to enter his life. For a man who had lived in isolation, surrounded by suspicion and contempt, this was unheard of. From this encounter, we can draw several profound lessons. To 1. God knows your name and sees your heart. The first lesson is simple, yet life-changing. Jesus knew Zacchaeus' name. He saw him not as a label tax collector, thief, outcast, but as a person. This is a reminder for us that God sees each of us fully. He knows our strengths, our weaknesses, and even the parts of our lives we hide from everyone else. In everyday life, when you feel overlooked at work, at school, or in your own family, remember that God sees you. You are not invisible. If you struggle with shame or feel like you don't belong, know that Jesus knows your name and calls you by it, just like he did with Zacchaeus. When someone else behaves in a way you cannot understand, try to see them as God sees them: complex, human, and capable of change. 2. True change starts with curiosity and a willing heart. Zacchaeus could have ignored the crowd, stayed in his house, and continued his life of greed. But he did not. He was curious about Jesus, and he wanted more. Even climbing a tree, a little embarrassing but necessary, showed that he was willing to do something different. In everyday life, real change often begins with curiosity and a desire to see things differently. You might feel stuck in your job, a bad habit, or a toxic relationship. The first step is simply looking for a better way, asking for guidance, and taking small intentional actions. Sometimes we need humility to reach for change. Like Zacchaeus climbing the tree, it may feel awkward or uncomfortable to seek help, to admit we are wrong, or to take steps toward growth, but that is where transformation begins. 3. Jesus offers acceptance before we are perfect. Notice that Jesus did not wait for Zacchaeus to give up his wealth or make everything right before showing acceptance. He saw Zacchaeus as he was, and extended love and attention to him immediately. In everyday life, you do not need to be perfect to be loved. You do not need to clean up your act perfectly before seeking God's help or the support of a friend. If you struggle with self-worth, remember that Jesus sees your potential, not just your mistakes. You are valuable now, not only after you change. When we accept people where they are, we allow them to begin their journey toward better choices. 4. Transformation leads to tangible actions. Zacchaeus' encounter with Jesus did not just change his feelings, it changed his behavior. He immediately declared that he would give half of his possessions to the poor and repay anyone he had cheated 4 times the amount he took. True transformation produces visible change. It is not enough to feel remorse or inspiration, we show it in how we live. In everyday life, if you have wronged someone, make it right. Apologize, repair the damage, and take steps to prevent repeating the mistake. If you have resources, use them to help others. Acts of generosity, kindness, and honesty are the fruits of a changed heart. Personal growth shows in our habits, relationships, and choices. If you feel inspired to change, let it manifest in action, not just words. 5. Change affects the community around you. When Zacchaeus changed, it wasn't just his own life that shifted. His generosity and honesty affected Jericho. People who had feared or hated him saw the transformation and began to believe in the possibility of grace. When one person allows change to enter their life, it can ripple outward. In everyday life, your positive choices influence your family, friends, and colleagues. A decision to be honest, kind, or forgiving encourages others to act similarly. Even small acts of integrity or generosity can inspire a wider community. Paying back a debt, helping someone in need, or showing patience can start a chain reaction of goodness. 6. Salvation and joy are found when Jesus enters our lives. Finally, Zacchaeus' story reminds us that true joy comes when we invite Jesus into our lives. He did not only remove guilt, he brought purpose, hope, and life. Zacchaeus' wealth, his power, and his isolation could not give him the fulfillment that a relationship with Jesus did. In everyday life, we often chase temporary satisfaction, money, success, or approval from others. But true contentment comes when we allow God's presence to guide our choices. Invite Jesus into your daily life. Pray, reflect, and make decisions that honor Him. Even small, consistent actions can transform your perspective, priorities, and relationships. When we welcome God's guidance, our hearts change, and we discover a joy that persists even in difficulties. To conclude, Zacchaeus' story is a reminder that no one is beyond redemption, that it is never too late to seek change, and that God's love is proactive. It reaches out to us before we are perfect. It teaches us that transformation requires curiosity, humility, action, and courage. Imagine how different life could be if we all approached our mistakes like Zacchaeus, willing to climb our trees, look honestly at our flaws, accept help, and let God's grace guide our next steps. The story reminds us that change begins within, but it affects everyone around us. When you face challenges, feel invisible, or wonder if you can ever be better, remember Zacchaeus. Remember the joy, freedom, and peace that came when he chose to step toward Jesus. Let his story inspire you to take one small intentional step today toward honesty, generosity, integrity, and love. Let us walk once more through these timeless stories. We will move gently, like one drifting on a calm river, pausing to notice the deeper meaning behind each moment. Each lesson opens like a flower, offering fragrance for the heart and nourishment for the soul. Lesson 1. The quiet strength of dignity. From the adulterous woman, we see how Jesus lifted her dignity when others sought only to shame her. The crowd wanted her downfall. They wanted her to be an example of disgrace. But Jesus reminded everyone that even in her weakness, she was a person of worth. The lesson here is that our mistakes do not take away our value. No matter what we have done, the breath of life within us carries dignity that cannot be erased. When we feel stripped of honor, we can remember that God still calls us by name, with tenderness and compassion. This truth soothes the weary soul, reminding us to walk with quiet confidence, no matter the voices of accusation around us. Lesson 2. The call to see beyond appearances. Zacchaeus was judged by many as a dishonest man because of his work as a tax collector. People saw his wealth and his reputation, and they dismissed him. Yet Jesus looked past the surface and saw his heart. He noticed the eagerness within him, the desire to climb high just for a glimpse of the Savior. The lesson we learn is to look beyond appearances. Someone who may seem unworthy in the eyes of the world might be seeking God with deep sincerity. In our own lives, we are called to pause before judging, to ask ourselves what unseen struggles or desires might lie beneath the surface of another's story. This softens our hearts and helps us welcome others with gentleness. Lesson 3. The courage to face change. The woman caught in adultery faced a moment where everything could have ended. Yet instead of destruction, she was offered a chance to begin again. That chance required courage, to step away from sin, to walk a new path. Likewise, Zacchaeus faced a decision when Jesus called him down from the tree. He could have remained the same, but he chose to change, giving back what he had taken unfairly and offering generosity instead of greed. The lesson for us is that real change is not easy. It asks for courage. It asks us to release habits, comforts, and ways of thinking that have held us tightly. Yet when we dare to step forward, grace meets us, and we find ourselves becoming freer than ever before. Lesson 4. The gentle power of presence. Notice how in both stories, Jesus did not give long lectures. He did not shout or accuse. Instead, he was present. With the woman, he bent down, writing silently in the dust. With Zacchaeus, he simply invited himself to dinner. The lesson here is that often the greatest gift we can give others is our presence. We do not always need the perfect words. Sometimes, sitting quietly with someone or sharing a meal speaks more powerfully than any speech. When we offer presence, we echo the kindness of Christ. Lesson 5. Freedom from labels. The woman was labeled an adulterer. Zacchaeus was labeled a sinner and a thief. Yet Jesus freed them both from these labels. He showed that no single mistake, no reputation, no past action defines who we truly are. The lesson is that God calls us beyond the names the world gives us. He calls us beloved, forgiven, and chosen. When others try to reduce us to our past, we can rest in the truth that our identity is written in the heart of God, not in the judgment of people. Lesson 6. Joy found in humility. Think of Zacchaeus, a wealthy man, climbing a tree like a child just to see Jesus. There is humility in this picture. A man of status lowering himself in the eyes of others, simply for the joy of catching a glimpse of hope. The lesson here is that humility often brings unexpected joy. When we let go of pride, when we stop worrying about how others see us, we open ourselves to experiences of wonder. Joy often comes when we kneel low, when we climb trees, when we risk being seen as small in the eyes of the world, because in those moments we draw near to God. Lesson 7. The invitation to release stones. The crowd around the adulterous woman held stones in their hands, ready to condemn. Yet one by one, they dropped them and walked away. The lesson is that in life, we too carry stones. Stones of bitterness, stones of judgment, stones of harsh words we long to throw at others. Jesus invites us to let them fall, to walk away from anger, and to choose compassion instead. By releasing our stones, we also free our hearts. Lesson 8. Hospitality of the heart. Zacchaeus opened his home to Jesus with joy. It was not only his home, but also his heart. He welcomed him fully, without hesitation. The lesson here is that hospitality is not just about food or shelter. It is about opening the heart. It is about letting God enter every corner of our lives, even the messy places. When we do, transformation flows naturally, and our homes become places of peace. Lesson 9. The beauty of second chances. The woman was given a second chance. Zacchaeus was given a second chance. Neither was turned away. Neither was defined by the first chapter of their story. The lesson is that life is full of fresh beginnings. Each sunrise whispers that yesterday does not have to define today. With God, the pages of our lives can always be rewritten. There is beauty in second chances, and they are offered to us each day. Lesson 10. The peace of walking forward. At the end of her story, the woman walked away in peace. At the end of his story, Zacchaeus walked with new purpose, restoring what was broken. Both took steps forward. The lesson is that peace is often found not in standing still, but in moving forward. We may not know where the road will lead, but if we take the next step with faith, peace will quietly follow. Lesson 11. The power of mercy over judgment. The crowd that encircled the woman was ready to throw stones. Judgment was their instinct. Punishment was their answer. Yet Jesus turned judgment back upon them. Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone. One by one the stones fell, not upon her, but onto the dust of the ground. Mercy triumphed over judgment that day. Zacchaeus, too, lived beneath the weight of judgment. His neighbors judged him for his betrayal, for his greed, for his cooperation with Rome. They had already passed sentence in their hearts. Zacchaeus was unworthy. Yet Jesus did not join in their verdict. Instead, he extended mercy. He chose to dine at Zacchaeus' home, to share bread and conversation. Mercy again triumphed over judgment. The lesson here is timeless. Judgment is easy, mercy is harder, but mercy heals. When we choose mercy, we open the possibility of change, both in others and in ourselves. Think of everyday life. A co-worker makes a mistake. A friend disappoints you. A family member falls short. Judgment flares quickly, sharp and instinctive. But mercy whispers another way: to pause, to forgive, to offer kindness instead of anger. Mercy does not mean ignoring wrongs. It means creating space for growth, space for healing, space for redemption. When mercy reigns over judgment, relationships are restored, hearts are softened, and peace flows like a river. Lesson 12. Joy found in letting go. For the woman, joy came not from clinging to the past, but from releasing it. She walked away from her accusers, not holding their condemnation, but letting it go. Freedom and joy awaited in the release. For Zacchaeus, joy came not from clinging to wealth, but from giving it away. He let go of his riches, and in return gained a joy far greater than coins could ever provide. The lesson here is that joy is often discovered in letting go. Letting go of shame, letting go of bitterness, letting go of possessions, pride, or control. The act of release creates space for peace, for contentment, for happiness that does not depend on circumstance. Think of a clenched hand holding tight to something heavy. Over time, the weight tires the hand, the arm, the heart. But when the hand opens, the burden falls and relief follows. So it is with our spirits. The tighter we cling, the heavier life becomes. But when we let go, when we trust God with what we cannot carry, joy rises like light breaking through clouds. Tonight, as we have walked together through these incredible stories from the Bible, the woman caught in adultery and Zacchaeus the tax collector, we have seen something truly remarkable. Both stories remind us that no one is beyond grace, no heart is beyond love, and no mistake is so great that it cannot be redeemed. From the woman caught in adultery, we learn that shame and guilt do not have to define us. We learn that mercy is stronger than judgment, that forgiveness is always available, and that leaving behind a life of sin is not a punishment, but a path to freedom, peace, and wholeness. We saw how Jesus meets us where we are, sees our hearts, and invites us into a better way, a lighter life, full of hope. From Zacchaeus, we learn that true transformation begins with curiosity and a desire to see things differently. Even when our lives feel small, isolated, or weighed down by mistakes, Jesus knows our names and sees our hearts. Change is not just about feelings, it is about action. Like Zacchaeus, when we embrace grace, our choices shift, our hearts open, and the light we receive spreads to those around us. His story shows that joy comes when we invite Jesus into our daily lives, when we seek integrity, generosity, and honesty, and when we allow love to shape our every step. Both stories together give us a clear message. We are all works in progress. Life may bring mistakes, failures, judgments, or moments when we feel invisible. But God's love is patient, enduring, and transformative. Grace is not just a story from the past, it is an invitation to live today with courage, kindness, and hope. As we carry these lessons into our own lives, we can remember to forgive others, to forgive ourselves, to act with integrity, and to embrace the joy that comes when love, mercy, and grace guide our decisions. These stories are not only tales from long ago, they are reminders that change, hope, and peace are always within reach. So as you lay your head down tonight, breathe deeply, feel the calm in your heart, and know that you are seen, loved, and forgiven. Every day is a new opportunity to take a small step toward kindness, to share mercy, and to live with the freedom that comes from grace. Good night, dear friend. May your dreams be gentle and full of peace. May your heart be light, your mind be calm, and your spirit rest in the quiet assurance that you are loved deeply, always. Sleep well, and wake tomorrow with a renewed sense of hope, joy, and the courage to walk in grace.